Hi everyone, this is Aditya and welcome back to my channel, The Automation Place. So today we are going to talk about state machines. So state machines are basically an advanced concept in UiPath, which is being used to model real-life business problems and scenario in automation. So I'm going to cover a very basic example on how to create a state machine and what are the different components of a state machine and what all those components mean. So please watch until the end of the video if you want to know how and where we can use these kind of concepts. So state machine basically has three different components. It has a state, it has a transition, and it has a final state. So a state has three different subparts: entry, transition, and exit. So entry is the starting point of a state. Exit exit is the last point of the state, and transition is basically used to move between different states. And final state is basically the last step of your automation or the last state of your automation where you put the final closing application logic or killing application logic when you are done with your automation. So I'll just quickly show you one quick example which I've tried to create here. And it's a very basic example. It talks about scraping some information from a website, adding it to a data table, and then data table is used as an Excel file. So very beginning of this process, you see here, there's one state. So these are states. If people who are new to UiPath, so these particular things are called as states. This is the final state and process, and these particular connectors are known as transitions. So every transition has a condition attached to it, a Boolean condition attached to it, on which it moves from one state to another. So I'll walk you through the example here. So basically what we are doing, we are opening an Amazon website, we are searching for some Samsung products, and we are scraping the information and saving it in an Excel file as a data table. So the very first step of a state machine is always the initialization of variables. So here if you go in, if you see here, I have created some different variables here. So if I open the variable tab, if I click on here, you'll see there are some different types of variables that are being created. So one is the product name, which is a string type. Product price is a string type. There's a browser element, there's an exception element, and there's a data table. So all these different kind of variables are being initialized in this step. So first step is always the initialization where you initialize your variables. And obviously everything we do it in a try catch because we want our automation to be efficient and effective, and it should always capture different kind of exception and come gracefully out of it. So here if you see here, for any exception I'm just assigning my variable system exception to the value of what the exception has actually occurred. So this is basically just a simple assignment. Using this particular assignment we will be traversing through different states. So if you see here, if I have a success transition, so if my system exception is nothing, that means there is no exception, then I'll move on to the next state. And if there is any error, if you see here not nothing, then I'll probably end the automation and give out some message. So what this is going to do to, if I'm having no exceptions at all, I'll move to the next stage where I'm opening the browser, I'm clicking on some search field, I'm typing Samsung, and again similar process, I'm capturing the exception and storing it inside the system exception variable. This variable again will be used to see whether there was any issue in this particular state. If it was having any issue, the system exception variable will have some value and the state will follow this path and it will go and end the process. And if it doesn't have any kind of exceptions, it has successfully implemented the logic which is there inside this particular state, it will come here to this particular state. So here again I'm trying to get the product name and I'm trying to get the product price. So these variables you can see here, the product name and the product price, and I'm creating a data table with these values. So if you see, I'm creating this data table called DT table and I'm adding this as an array row inside the data table to store my values which I'm scraping from the website. Similarly, again, there's some assigning of exception if this particular state fails for any reason. And again, the last step and the last state is basically to store that particular data table within an Excel which I'm trying to create. So here I'm copying this data table within the right range activity using an Excel application scope, and this particular file will be created which will have the results. If you see here, for every failure operation, I'm trying to log a message just to see what particular exception is coming. So if I click on this, if you see the message, you'll see I'm printing the stack trace. So stack trace will give me the complete details of the exception. So I'm just logging it here as a console output. So if you want to see, you can see it through the console. Alternatively, every failure state is moving to this end process. Within the end process, I have just one message box, one if condition where I'm checking if there was any exception. If there was any exception, it will throw me this error. If there was no exception, it will probably tell me that process had no errors. So basically what happens in a state machine. So if you can see here, it is giving you a lot of different options to handle different kind of exceptions. So you can have multiple transitions if you want to have not just a system exception. Let's say there are different business exceptions or different multiple types of exceptions, like maybe an IO exception or an Excel exception or maybe an orchestrator exception. So you can condition those exceptions and do a transition to the respective state that you want to. So state machine gives you this feasibility, this capability to manage your complex business rules, complex business workflow in a very efficient manner so that you can easily automate or maybe um, easily accomplish the results that you want to do. So here, if I see here this simple failure message at three different states, which is taking me back to the end process, and the success state take me to the next process. So if you open a new RE framework, you will see a lot of different kind of activities, killing applications, closing applications, config input as a parameter, a lot of different things you will see. But it's not necessary to use those kind of framework. You can customize this framework as per the process you are automating, and it doesn't have to be complex at all the time. Wherever you are trying to work with the orchestrator queues, where you know that you have to process thousands of transactions, you can use the concept of the orchestrator queuing and transactions, and then probably you can use those kind of killing applications, getting transactions, adding transactions. So it really depends on what kind of process you are automating. So this is just a very simple example just to tell you what a basic state machine is. And it's very simple. You have some set of independent logical units within each state, and based on certain criteria, certain conditions, you move from one state to another. Okay, so I hope this clears it out. I'll show you one example what it is doing. So this is my output folder. Here it will be a file will be generated. So I'll quickly run this particular automation so that you can see what it is doing. So this is started. So it's gonna start any moment. Yeah. So it's coming to this Amazon page, and if you go here, type Samsung. Yep. So here it's going to scrape an information from the Samsung unit, and it's going to store it within an Excel. So you see this final message came, process completed, closing applications, and process had no errors. So it didn't find any errors. And if I come here, if I open this, you'll see this particular detail is scraped. So I think I gave the selector for this particular product. So it has scraped this particular item, it has scraped this amount, and it has come and pasted it within this Excel in a data table, and the data table is being outputted as an Excel file. So this is a very small example on how a state machine works. So this is basically a state machine, what it looks like when you open a new one. But like I mentioned, this particular kind of framework is good enough if you're working with distributed processing, when you're working with a lot of different queues, a lot of different transactions, and for you, time save is the key KPI on which you're working. So you can go ahead in this particular fashion. And if your automation doesn't require you to work with queues and transactions, You can create your own states, you can create your own branches, everything you can create yourself, and then see how it goes. And again, to handle exceptions, if you have seen my previous videos, you can handle exceptions either through your try and catch, and or if you want, you can have one global exception handler for this project, which can handle all the exceptions for you in one specified way. Or else, if you want to have this kind of transitions where you're facing any exception, you can probably do some particular steps here. And before I forget, every state has three paths: entry, exit, and transition. So entry is basically what your RPA should do once it enters the state machine for particular state. Exit is basically something that you want your RPA to do once it is exiting the state. It is not necessary to always have an exit state unless your automation requires so. And this is basically the transition. So once it fails, it will go to this end process. And if it's a success, it will go to this particular state. So this was a very basic example, guys. Let me know if you want a much more detailed version of it, or if you want to try it out, if you're having some issues in implementing anything, I'll be happy to help. And please like and subscribe this video, and subscribe to my channel, put on your comments, and let me know what you guys think of UiPath, what do you guys think of RPA. I'll be very much happy to assist you, make you learn and make you more interested in the field.